Good morning, all of you. This is the class for BA first year compulsory English or BSc first year compulsory English. Why I use two classes together? Because the syllabus is the same for compulsory English. I am here. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. I am Dr. PRAMOD AMBADASRAO PAWAR, Assistant Professor and Head Department of English, Sant Jnaneshwar Mahavidyalaya, Swaigao. I am the Director of Internal Quality Assurance Cell, Sant Jnaneshwar Mahavidyalaya, Soigao, IQEC. Today we are going to learn one of the poems by Robert Frost, which is prescribed to your syllabus by Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Marathwada University, Aurangabad. So before we proceed further, it's quite natural and quite useful to know what exactly poetry means and how it is different from prose. You might have studied prose and poetry in your earlier standards, right? Prose and poetry. What is poetry? According to Carlyle, poetry is nothing but a musical thought. William Wordsworth, the romantic poet, defines poetry. Poetry is the breath and final spirit of all knowledge. Poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings taking its origin from emotions recollected in tranquility. So he talks about the spontaneity of feelings, spontaneity of emotions and feelings, and that can be composed in tranquility. So the poem which are going to learn today, entitled Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. This is a poem composed by Robert Frost. The name is quite familiar with all of us. Whenever I utter the poet's name, Robert Frost, I come across his beautiful lines from the same poem. And one of the quotations about life. What he says, how many times it thundered before Franklin took the hint, how many apples fell on Newton's head before he took the hint. The nature is always hinting at you, it hints us over and over again, and we suddenly take the hint. And I remember the best concluding lines of Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost, where he says, the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. So these are the beautiful concluding lines of Robert Frost's poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. So these are the best lines which were appreciated and liked the most by the first Prime Minister of India, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who wrote on a slip of paper these four lines and kept it on the table before his death. The same lines, the concluding lines. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. So let's know more about this poem. What the poem is all about. What is its concern? Stopping by woods on a snowy evening is a philosophical poem. Is a philosophical poem. Stopping by woods on a snowy evening was published in 1923 in his volume New Hampshire. Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening is a beautiful poem. The poem is nothing but the story of a writer passing by some woods. Here, the wood means jungle, forest. Here, the wood refers to life. Wood means life. So, very simple event is here that stopping by woods on a snowy evening is the story of a writer passing by some woods. The poet is passing by the jungle, the wood, the forest. The poet is traveling in the dark through the snow and pauses with his horse near the woods by a neighbor's house to observe the snow falling around him. See how simple it is for our comprehension. Here is the wood, here is the forest, here is the jungle, and the poet happens to pass by some woods. The poet is traveling in the dark through the snow. The snow is falling. And the poet is with his horse. And the poet looks at the dazzling beauty of the snow falling, the forest, and he wishes to stay a little in the forest. And there is his horse near the woods. By a neighbor's house to observe the snow falling around him. So it's near a neighbor's house. And he observes the snow falling around him. And he's deeply fascinated by the dazzling beauty of the snow falling, the scenario. The poet continues to poise near the woods. He is deeply attracted by the deep, dark silence of his surroundings. He wanted to enjoy the dazzling beauty of the nature in that deep, dark night. But his duties towards his life forced him to move ahead. Can we stay in a place for a longer time? Absolutely not. Because there are certain duties. The duties are quite mandatory, obligatory, compulsory, which we have to fulfill and perform. So we cannot stay in some places for a longer time because we have to return back to our work. We have to get back to our work. So here the poet continues to poise near the woods. He is attracted by the deep, mysterious, enigmatical, secret, dark silence of his surroundings. And the poet is in jungle with his horse, does not want to go home because he is deeply fascinated by the dazzling beauty of the nature, and it is his duty that makes him quit the place and go home and perform his duties. And he is not able to move ahead only because of the mandatory duties he is supposed to perform. He feels compelled, forced to move ahead into the snowy woods, but he finally decides to continue his journey. He wanted to move ahead in the appreciation of snowy beauty, snowy woods, but still he retreats his journey back due to the roles or the duties he has to perform. So let's go through the analysis of the poem, and I hope that you will understand everything that I explain here. Stopping by woods on a snowy evening. The poet of stopping by woods on a snowy evening stays by some woods on his way one evening. This is the evening time, and he stays for a little time by some woods. The poet knows the owner of the woods and also the place where he lives. Who is the owner of the woods? We see the human beings, but the owner of all these forests, the nature, and everything is God, the supreme power. The poet here is well acquainted with the owner of the woods, and he also knows where he lives. And he assured that the owner lives in a village. He says that the owner of the wood lives in a village and he will not see him stopping here. There is no problem for him. Just 1 minute, one call is there. Yes, I was talking about the poet in stopping by woods on a snowy evening. He happens to stop by some woods on his way one evening. The poet knows the owner of the woods and also the place where he lives. He is assured that the owner lives in a village and he will not see him stopping here. It simply means that there is no question about his stay in the woods, about his stopping in the forest, and there is no restriction at all for him to be there to appreciate the beauty of the nature, the dazzling beauty of the nature. Hence, he can enjoy the natural beauty of his snow covered woods. The woods are covered by snow. There is a natural, dazzling beauty that he appreciates in the nature. The poet says that he stops near the farmhouse. This will be a little strange thing for his dear horse to stop in this dark evening. They have stopped between the frozen lake and woods. The poet calls his horse my little horse because it is extremely dear to him and possibly it can be baby horse that is pony. This demonstrates that the speaker may be a humble or ordinary citizen or cannot afford to buy an upscale horse. He embodies the horse by indicating that he can think and refer to him as a person. How interesting it is to talk about these things. In this poem, the poet stops near a farmhouse. there is a farmhouse, and he appreciates the beauty of the nature, and he's enticed, he is deeply impressed, fascinated. His eyes got dazzled. A little strange thing for his dear horse to stop in the dark evening. Okay, so here this will be a little strange thing for his dear horse to stop in this dark evening. Look at the two perspectives made in this poem. The first thing is that how an individual appreciates the beauty of the nature, one thing. On the second hand, how the horse feels about the nature, the animal. This is quite an unusual experience for the deer horse to stay in this dark evening. Maybe the horse thinks a bit awkward, strange, bizarre, and the horse may be thinking of returning home. On the other hand, the poet does not want to go home. He does not want to return to his duties, which are mandatory to be performed by him. He wants to spend more time in the lap of nature, in the appreciation of the beauty of the nature. His eyes got dazzled by the extreme beauty of the nature, and he loses his existence. So here, this scenario has stopped him. The nature has stopped between the frozen lake and woods. The poet calls his horse my little horse. The poet says, "This is my little horse." This shows his love to his horse because the horse is extremely dear to him. Maybe the horse is a pony or a baby horse. This shows the fact that the poet loves animal very much. The poet, the speaker may be a humble and ordinary citizen, and the speaker may not be a rich man and cannot afford to buy an upscale horse. That's why there is a pony. And the horse indicates the fact that he can think and refer to him as a person, personification. So, in the next few lines of the poem, the poet suggests the weather. How is the weather? The climate is cold. It's a freezing cold. And there is a freezing lake as well. The woods like darkest evening suggest several things. The poet is depressed due to his long journey and chilling weather. The poet has traveled a long distance and maybe he experienced chilling weather, chilling climate, chilling atmosphere. And this may be the longest journey, longest night of the year that the poet experienced with, as he has spent maximum hours of darkness. This is a winter peak in the northern hemisphere. The poet says that the horse is shaking its head, the horse is ringing the bell attached to his harshness. This is quite suggestive, indicative, connotative that the horse is asking his master that is there any problem with him to stay there. See, the horse is asking his master, is there an issue? Because it is unusual for him to pause by the stands, by the woods within the darkness. The horse is not able to get himself adjusted with the darkness. He wants light. The horse wants to get rid of that, and he may be asking to his master, is there any problem with him to stay in the wood, to stay in the darkness, and to pause or to stand by the woods. Most interestingly, the poem has the sounds. The poem has imaginations, and three sounds are heard in the poem. What are the three sounds? One sound is the bell is ringing, the bell of a horse is ringing, harshness bell. The second sound is the sound of the wind, the light wind, there is a sound. And the third sound is the snow is falling. It can be called as snowflakes, and there is the sound of that. So these three sounds make the disturbance or breaks the silence of the nature. In the last few lines of the poem, the poet describes the woods using three adjectives. He uses three adjectives: lovely, dark, and deep. This means that the poet enjoys the scene very much. He wants to cherish the beauty of nature for a longer time. But he has a few liabilities in life. He has traveled a long distance before he sleeps. He cannot stop in the jungle for a long time. He has to move ahead. The poet repeats the last line to draw the attention of the readers. In the last lines, metaphorically refers to sleep as death. The writer says, in our real life, we want to do many things and enjoy many moments, but due to our responsibilities, due to our duties, due to our primary duties, we have to come back. Okay? So the duties are much more important in life. So here the poet wants to appreciate the beauty of the nature, but he cannot stay there for a long time. He has to return home. He has to join his duties again. As we have many desires in our life, it is not possible to achieve them in a short span of life. Life has many plans for us. Different people have different thinking. People interpret life differently at different times. Some critics interpret the words of the poem in a different way. The woods here can also suggest distractions, temptations during the journey of life. Some people may believe that the poet wants to say the fact that we should focus on our goals of life. We must accomplish our duties before we die. We have to perform all our duties very well in life. The poet suggests us that we should focus on our duties. We should not spend our valuable time on distractions of life. This may be the most important message that the poet gives us. So these are the lines I would like to read here, and the poem will be Ohar. Whose woods are they? Whose woods? These are, I think I know. His horse is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harshness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and drawy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. These are the wonderful, mysterious, philosophical, light, transcendental lines of this poem. I repeat, the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. This jungle is quite lovely, dark and deep, but I have some duties to perform. And before death,